MOTROLIX.
Hello and welcome to the 14th episode of the Cadillac Society podcast, where we discuss the latest news, rumors, and anything else surrounding the iconic luxury marque. On today's episode, long-awaited exclusive production figures of the Cadillac CT6 with the Blackwing engine. I'm your host G, and joining us as always is Cadillac Society Executive Editor Alexander Luft.
Hey G.
So, are you ready for the long-promised episode on the Blackwing engine?
Well, I guess I'll have to answer your question with another question. Does a Cadillac wear a crest?
Oh man, you sound ready.
I'm ready.
Okay, before we start, new listeners keep finding us. So I'd like to take a few moments to remind our new listeners where they can find all of our episodes. CadillacSociety.com/podcast is the place to watch, listen, and subscribe to this show. You can also find us in all popular podcatchers. And if you enjoy the show, please share it, tweet it, put it on Facebook, send the YouTube link to your friends. We want even more people to know about the Cadillac Society podcast. All right, so how many CT6s were made with the Blackwing engine?
1,200. 1,200. Okay. But before I get into the specifics of how that breaks out, I thought I might just, give our listeners some background on this engine, because there might be some confusion here. So the Blackwing engine is not in the CT4-V Blackwing or the CT5-V Blackwing. So in other words, the Blackwing engine is not in the Blackwing cars. That's the first thing to know, okay? Instead, this Blackwing engine that we're discussing here was a very special engine. It was a very limited run engine with only 1,200 units made of CT6s with the engine. And the reason I say it's special is that this was Cadillac's first dual overhead cam V8 since the Northstar. And the Northstar in and of itself was a great engine. But, that went away at the turn of the century, really. I guess it lived a little bit past that, so a few years after the turn of the century. But the thing that made the Blackwing engine special, and by the way, it was a 4.2 liter twin turbo V8. It was a hot V setup, and it was developed exclusively for Cadillac. And it was a clean sheet design. It was very smooth. It was very refined, but it was still powerful. It was almost like a love note to Cadillac from GM, because finally, instead of sharing, the corporate GM engines, the Blackwing engine essentially would enable Cadillac to have its own engine. Finally, Cadillac's, luxury cars, the standard of the world, it would finally be a Cadillac exclusive engine. And it would have not only gone into the CT6, but it would have gone into a few other products as well, which I won't get into now, but I'll just leave it at that. And so this engine, it was interesting. It was not a hammer. If you look at the LT4 in the CT5-V Blackwing and the Escalade V right now, the same engine that was in the CTS-V, third generation CTS-V, those engines were hammers. They were absolute hammers, meaning that they still are, right? You punch it, the thing is screaming. You can hear the engine. You hear the exhaust. It's a visceral experience, and it's not really maybe an experience that many luxury car buyers would want, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, the LT4 is awesome. I love the LT4. But then when you start to look at, some of these vehicle segments where refinement, a lot of refinement comes into play, then that's where really the LT4 doesn't really hold a candle, right? It makes the power, it makes the torque, but it's a hammer. And the Blackwing engine, which was RPO code LTA, it was not a hammer. It was this kind of suave thing, right? It was very smooth. It had very smooth power delivery. It was refined. It purred. It didn't yell. It didn't scream. It wasn't like a Metallica concert. It was more of a, it was still powerful. You still got, your jam on, right? But it was different. in a different way. So that's really what this engine was all about. And it made it was available in two different power outputs. So the first was 500 horsepower and 574 pound-feet of torque. That was in the CT6 Platinum. And then 550 horsepower and 640 pound-feet of torque in the CT6-V. In both cases, the transmission was the 10-speed automatic that GM co-developed with Ford. And so, as I said, it was a very low production number of 1,200 units on the dot. It wasn't like 1,201 or 1,199. It was 1,200, period. These figures, they come from my sources. We can trust these numbers. I trust these numbers with my life, honestly. And first and foremost. And then secondly, if anyone wants to see these numbers on paper, so to speak, or on the screen, I know it's a bit difficult for some to, listen to numbers or watch a video about numbers, but CadillacSociety.com is where we will have an article that contains these figures. And I will also include a link to that article in the show notes here as well. But the way this breaks out it was only available for two model years, 2019 and 2020. For the 2019 model year, the CT6-V accounted for 504 units, and the CT6 Platinum with the LTA Blackwing accounted for 168 units produced. So that brings the cumulative total for the 2019 model year of CT6s with the Blackwing LTA engine to 672 units. For the 2020 model year, it was a bit less. So it was 411 units produced of the CT6-V and 117 units produced of the CT6 Platinum with the 4.2. So a total of 528. And so when you put these numbers into perspective, compared to total or overall CT6 production for those two model years. So for the 2019 model year, there was a total of 6,783 CT6s produced. So when you do the math, that essentially means that just about 10% of all CT6 production for the 2019 model year was the CT6 with the Blackwing engine. And then for the 2020 model year, it was just about 14% of the CT6 with the Blackwing engine as well, combined, CT6-V and CT6 Platinum with the LTA.
So if this was such a special engine, why did Cadillac can it?
Poor life choices. Essentially, that's what it boils down to, is poor life choices. I kid, of course, but it actually kind of sort of is true. I can do an entire episode about why the Blackwing engine went away. And in fact, I'm going to put it on the board. So we will do an episode exactly about this, because if we end up doing it here, we're going to spend more time talking about why it went away than the actual figures, right? But suffice it to say, it was just poor planning on GM's part overall, and a few things didn't line up the way that they really wanted to, and then the AV investment cycle also hit, and so all that together essentially spelled the death knell of the LTA engine, the Blackwing engine. Now, instead of getting into that, though, what I can do is give you a little surprise, because this is something that we didn't promise before. We promised Blackwing engine production figures, right? But I do have a surprise for our listeners and our viewers, and that is a breakdown of colors of CT6s with the Blackwing engine. So for the 2019 model year, the 2019 CT6 Platinum, what do you think the most popular color was? Was it purple, white, black, red, yellow? Half of those colors were not available.
Caddies always look good in black, man.
You're quite observant. Yeah.
But the white, the white Cadillacs also, those white Escalades also pop.
Yeah.
But which one was it?
So it was the Black Raven for the 2019 Platinum. And again, Platinum with the LTA. There was a Platinum with the twin turbo V6, the LGW, which I'm not talking about here. This is exclusively limited to the LTA.
Lucky 1200.
Exactly, the Lucky 1200.
Do they know they're lucky?
Well, they will now. They will now after listening to this, because it's very little. It's only a few units. So yeah, Black Raven was the most popular color for the 2019 Platinum, and for the 2020 Platinum, it was Crystal White Tricoat. So to me, the CT6 always looked good in black and in white. I personally would have gotten a white one. I like white cars myself. And then for the CT6-V, it's Black Raven, regardless of model year. It doesn't matter if it was 19 or 20. Those were the only two model years that this engine saw production in these vehicles. So essentially, it's black and white. Pretty boring, but that's what people buy. You know, like everyone wants to have an orange car, right? Or a yellow color option, right? I remember back in the day, like Lexus had the IS, and it was they offered it in yellow, they offered it in orange, they offered it in this really wild blue. Guess what? Yeah, no one bought it. Nobody ordered it, and as a result of no one ordering it, no one bought it, and then as a result of that, it was discontinued after 1 or 2 model years. That's it. So all these, poppy colors, maybe they work on some cars, but on something like the CT6, especially with the real V8 Blackwing engine, it's black and white.
This thing is what, close to like the LS?
Well, the CT6 was always an interesting car because, yeah, size-wise, it's a 7 Series, S-Class, LS, A8 type of vehicle. But from a price and positioning standpoint, it was really positioned one segment lower. So it was the size of, say, an LS or a 7 Series, but at the price of a 5 Series or a GS. So that was Cadillac's, really its first, I'd say, in the modern era. It was the first vehicle to be positioned as a tweener, an in-between kind of segment vehicle. That, of course, was followed by the CT5, same formula, right? It is still in production, obviously. So it's positioned, from a size standpoint, it's closer to a 5 Series, closer to the E segment, E-Class, right? But from a price standpoint, it's priced at the D segment, so 3 Series, C-Class. And so it fits between segments. Same thing for the CT4. It's a big C segment vehicle, but it's priced more towards the bottom end of the C segment. So it's a very interesting and unique strategy. Cadillac isn't the only ones that did this, but after the first gen ATS and the third gen CTS, they just said, well, we're going to start doing this tweener strategy again, which really was in and of itself coined by the first generation CTS and then followed up by the second generation CTS, this kind of tweener positioning strategy. So very unique vehicle. The CT6 was also, I think it was one of Cadillac's best designs over the past decade or so. And it also was an engineering marvel. Not only did it look good, but it was a huge thing. It had full-size proportions, but it had mid-size weight. So it weighed as much as a mid-size car, but it had the dimensions, the room, the space, the presence, because of those, proportions, of a full-size, executive level vehicle, like a 7 Series, like an S-Class, like a A8. Only a few of those have presence, by the way. Like, I don't think the A8 has presence at all anymore. It did in the past, but doesn't anymore.
Looking at that engine, the price point, that engine sounds super intriguing. It's a shame that it was only 1,200 units. Yeah. Looking forward to the backstory.
Yeah, me too. We will do an episode on the backstory of why the Blackwing engine died the death that it did, because it didn't have to. It could have died a different kind of death, a calmer, quieter, more peaceful kind of death. But in this case, it didn't really pan out, unfortunately.
It's a quick slice of the throat.
It was a violent,
just dumped in the alley.
Yeah.
It was horrible.
It was borderline automotive malpractice.
Oh, jeez.
So we will cover that on a separate episode.
I want all of it, all the juicy details. This is they could have put it in a lot of things. All right, well, we'll get to it.
My mouth is shut. until the next episode. Well, it won't be the next episode, but it will be an episode in the future that we will discuss this.
Soon, hopefully.
I can literally go on for more than this episode. I can spend more time about why than I can about the production figures.
Oh, well, that's an episode I'm looking forward to.
Yeah. And by the way, the colors that I mentioned, I will have a full breakdown of the colors in the show notes as well. We will have an article not just about black and white, but about the entire color palette and what the color composition was for each color per model year for the CT6-V as well as the CT6 Platinum 4.2.
Sounds good.
Yep.
All right, folks. As promised and delivered, the CT6 Blackwing engine sales figures.
Production figures.
That's true. We didn't get the sales figures. This is what was made.
This is what was made. I mean, they sold every single one of them. So
Lucky ones. These are the lucky ones.
one of 1,200. Yeah.
It's like a Willy Wonka ticket. Alrighty. Thank you all for joining us on the 14th episode of the Cadillac Society podcast. You can find this show at CadillacSociety.com/podcast and on the MOTROLIX Network YouTube channel. Please remember to hit that like button and give us a follow or subscribe. We're also on your favorite podcatchers, so be sure to subscribe and leave a review there. If you would like us to discuss something specific, you can now suggest a topic by going to CadillacSociety.com/podcast. And as we mentioned earlier, if you enjoyed this show, please share it, tweet it, put it on Facebook, send the YouTube link to your friends. The more people that know about the Cadillac Society podcast, the merrier.
Mm-hmm. And we kind of do this we're doing this for free. You know,
It's a family thing.
It is.
This is friends. This is family. I like this.
Yeah. If you share it with someone, great. If not, we're not gonna die because of it. But it would be nice if you do.
Let's come in a little closer. A little closer. Right there. Good. Be sure to visit CadillacSociety.com for the latest news and forums.
MOTROLIX.
Cadillac Society is an independent enthusiast website and podcast and is not affiliated with, sponsored by, or otherwise associated with Cadillac or General Motors.